What do you do when the unthinkable happens twice? I talk with award-winning author JoAnn Kuzma Deveny, who lost her son, and years later, her husband. She shares the raw, honest journey of grief and the hope she found in God. It's also in her book, When Bluebirds Fly. Well, welcome to A Widow's Heart. I'm Pamela Dell, your host. It's great to have you along. And I've got a very exciting, wonderful guest who's got some hope for you and for me. It's JoAnn Kuzma Deveny, who is an award-winning author. You have been on so many national and local TV and radio shows, including mine here at 98.5 KTIS. And it's just so great to have you on the podcast finally to share your incredible story. I am so impressed with you, JoAnn. You are such an incredible author and a writer. Where did your love for writing come from?
Oh, thank you, Pam. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah.
I'll try to shorten the story. When I was younger, I didn't have many friends, and I would take my bike to the dumps, which we called the dumps, which was a hidden area, wooded area. And I'd go to the library first, and I'd go up there all day and I'd read from 7 years old on until I discovered boys. So.
That is so funny. Well, yeah. Your first book, it's a beautiful book. And if you're listening and you get a chance to find this, it's on Amazon, When Bluebirds Fly, Losing a Child, Living with Hope. And this book, your story, is so beautiful about something that's so tragic and so hard to talk about. And I know it's been a few years now, but I know that it's still in your heart. So let's start with that and that little guy named Billy in your life. You're from Minnesota, and this all started on Lake Minnetonka, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
I start the book on the day that Billy died. And the book is creative nonfiction. So I write in my husband's voice, and I have my journaling after each chapter so that I could give you a view of what a father goes through and a mother goes through. So it's creative nonfiction, and I add the testimonies from the first responders and my son and the babysitter who was with Billy when he drowned. So it's written differently.
So how old again was Billy when this happened?
Billy was 18 months old, but he was quite advanced. He walked at 8 months old.
Oh,
so he was, it's almost like he knew he had a short time to live. He wanted to experience everything.
Oh, my goodness. Can you share that story just as much as you can?
Sure. We were out on our boat, and we were cruising along the lakeshore of Lake Minnetonka. And at home, our kids were with the babysitter. And I was looking at the big mansions, and I was dreaming of having more and another child possibly. And at that moment when we were going by these mansions, and I was dreaming of having a bigger home for my two sons, Billy was opening the screen door to our house and shutting it behind him, and he ran into the shores of Lake Minnetonka. And I didn't realize in that moment that I would soon be looking back and wanting what I had instead of dreaming for more.
Yeah.
So, Billy, next I found myself at the hospital cradling his body. And
I can't even imagine.
Crying out to God, please help me. It was a God who had turned stranger to me. So in Billy's death, I had to rediscover who God was. There was a lot of anger, a lot of denial, of course. There was guilt. And I felt like I was reaching for him with one hand and shaking my fist at him with the other hand because I was so angry at him, but I knew that he could help me. And so I kept in touch with him. Now, my husband, on the other hand, pushed God away because his anger was full-fold. So we went through some marital problems after Billy died, and I explained that in my book.
And that's no surprise, right? I mean, how did you get through, I know as widows, and we have these discussions, but how did you get through the first moments, the first hours when that happened? And then there's also the babysitter, who I'm sure was just horrified.
Yes. The first few moments, denial, kicks in. So denial is a friend. sometimes. If it hangs on too long, you're going to eventually have to go through your grief. I say that I have learned that in bereavement, I have to, speaking as a flight attendant, you have to go right through the turbulence. You can't go around it, or else you're going to be circling your destination for a lifetime before landing. So I went into denial, but what I had to do was, when the pain hit, and it always hits and mornings are the worst, read the Bible. And I always read Job, and I read the Psalms. And those were the only two things that really comforted me. I wasn't a big Bible reader back then, but I found these verses and I could relate to Job and the Psalms the most. So after I read them, I would put the Bible on my chest, and that was the only way I could go to sleep at night or in the morning if I woke up. I found symbolism, any kind of grief, is a very important tool. You need to visit the grave. Or some people need to visit the grave. It's doing things for your child or for your husband that you used to do before, because all of a sudden it stops and there's an emptiness. And I've learned that grief is very humbling. And if you're not humbled and you're not empty, how can God come and fill that void for you unless you open yourself up to him?
Yeah.
So I would also say grief is very redundant, because it's not a straight path uphill towards a better ending. It's up and down like a roller coaster. You go through the anger, the guilt, the denial, the depression, the sudden levity, all kinds of emotion, and it's not in any order. So I found what my atheist friend would tell me, that my God is a crutch. I say,
I've heard that. I've heard that. Yes.
And I say, yes, he is a crutch. He's a crutch when I can't walk. He's my life jacket when I can't swim. And he's my wings when I want to take off and fly.
That is absolutely beautiful. I'm talking with JoAnn Kuzma Deveny, Losing a Child, Living with Hope, one of 3 books. And we may have to have podcast number 2 to get through each one. But I know that from your husband's point of view, in this book, you were talking about he went to a grief group, and you guys had different experiences with grief groups individually, right?
Yes, we went to a Compassionate Friends, which is an amazing grief group. It's run by parents, not by professionals, but you could say they're professionals in their experiences.
Right.
Yeah, my husband only went to one meeting, and he never went back again. And I went for probably 8 months. And the most I got out of that was, in everyday life, people were asking me, how's Danny? That is my oldest son. How is Danny? And they want to hear about Danny. They're not comfortable talking about Billy. But in this grief group, they didn't want to hear about Danny. They wanted to hear about Billy. And I could finally speak about him and my memories, and very helpful.
I'm just trying to find the chapter in here. I don't know exactly the title, but it's on symbolism in loons at the lake. And,
yes.
Yeah. And
so you're looking at my widow book.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
No, was that what it was? Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm going back and forth, because JoAnn is also the author of I Am Widow, Hear Me Roar, Confessions of a Surviving Spouse. And yes, it truly happened. JoAnn tragically lost her baby little boy, and then you lost your husband.
Yes.
How long after that? And
it was 11 years later, and I found myself in the ICU again. This time I wasn't cradling my son's body, but I was at the bedside of my husband, who 3 days before was mowing the lawn. 2 days before, he was diagnosed with APL, leukemia, and the day before, the doctor gave him an 80% chance of full survival. So I wasn't ready for it. And I was at his bedside with my 14-year-old son. My 14-year-old son was holding his hand. And my husband at that point was probably brain dead, but he was stroking my son's hand as my son held his hand. And this time I wasn't saying, oh, please, God, help me. I was saying, oh, no, not again. It was just a please, God, not again. I left that hospital like I did with Billy, having that weird feeling of leaving something behind again. You go into denial totally. I was on the car ride home. I was thinking about, wait till I tell Dick about this.
Right.
Right.
I totally remember that. I remember John, my late husband, had, the John Deere tractor, and I would look out and just, he's going to come around the corner on that thing mowing the lawn anytime,
Yes.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. It's so strange how.
And then your heart sinks when you realize that's not going to happen. You're not going to see him.
Okay. So your husband passed away very suddenly, and you've still got your son, Danny, who's lost his little brother, and now he's lost his dad. You lost your baby, and you've lost your husband. How did you get through that? I mean, you never get through it. Yeah.
Right. Well, my son was 4 when Billy died, and he had so many questions. He because he didn't know completely about God or heaven or death. So he had so many questions, so I couldn't stay in my denial very long. Now, when my husband died, Danny was 14 years old. Okay. My 4-year-old had a lot of questions. 14-year-old wouldn't talk at all, which is pretty common. So, with my vague psychology degree.
I have one too.
Yeah.
From a long time ago, a BA. I don't know what that gets you. But.
Yeah, exactly. Me too. So I used some kind of Freudian techniques on Danny. So when I was alone with Danny and something reminded me of his dad, I would talk about it out loud, like, maybe I'm mashing potatoes or something. Remember when your dad used to mash? And he wouldn't respond, but he would listen. He would perk up and he would listen. Or I'd say, remember when your dad watched this movie? He wouldn't comment, but he would perk up and listen. And I think in this way, I was speaking for him when he couldn't himself. It stopped it from becoming buried, the grief, I believe. And then when I would cry in front of him, he would come over to me and wrap his strong arms around me and just hold me while I cried. He wouldn't cry, but I believe that I was crying for him. And he felt a little bit of comfort in my tears. So that was my way of getting that grief out of him and bringing it to the surface. That's all I could do, because I would try to do routines, like do dinner every night, which I never did before. But I'd make the same thing every night. And I tried to talk to him. And if he didn't answer, I'd just do a monologue. Or you could say I was talking to myself, but widows do that anyway, right?
We do. And it's okay.
We'll be right back. I'm your host, Pam, and I want to thank Wings for Widows for their continued sponsorship of A Widow's Heart podcast. If you've lost your spouse, you may know the confusion in the middle of grief when you have to make major financial decisions. I know I do. Wings for Widows can help, and it's free to you. More than 85% of women of all ages responding to a State Farm survey said that being the sole financial decision maker is the most challenging aspect of being a widow. Today, with more than 50 volunteers, Wings for Widows provides pro bono financial coaching to women from all walks of life nationwide. I hope you check them out. They're ready to help at wingsforwidows.org.
It was kind of like a talk host with the unresponsive guest, you could say.
Yeah.
So I did more routines with him. I developed my living room into a teen center, got rid of the coffee table, put a foosball table in it, put a poker table on my kitchen table, lava lamps, drugs allowed. No drugs allowed.
Wait a minute.
Yeah. Drum sets.
Yeah. That's so funny.
What are the video games? Game Boy.
Yeah.
So I just built so the kids would come to my house. And then I would retreat in my bedroom and I would listen through the vent to make sure nothing's going on.
Yeah.
And so
You're
in
a
that
smart
way,
mom.
I think eventually he dealt with his grief, but I wouldn't say he did until he got to college. And he wrote his essays on his father's death. And he got into many very prestigious colleges with that essay. So he did. I think that's when he started really confronting his grief. And about that, journaling is so important, I think, when you're bereaved, when you're a widow, if you lose anybody, I think you need to write it down, and you can write it down while you're talking to God. You can actually talk to God through your writings. And it kind of sorts out the cobwebs of your mind, and it straightens it out a little bit. And it feels like more of a communication, I think, with God. And that's it. Keep in communication with God.
It sounds like Danny really followed in your footsteps a little bit. Is writing a part of his life now?
No, well, he's a lawyer.
Oh, good. Yeah, there's some sort of writing going on there.
But he is a very good writer. And his testimony is in the back of When Bluebirds Fly, from his memory of when Billy died. And he was only 4 years old. So that's, I ended all the testimonies with his. When he was, I think he was 19 or 20 when he wrote that testimony and what he remembered of Billy's death.
Well, again, it's such, I mean, I just keep saying beautiful. It's just a beautiful book. So well written. The first, When Bluebirds Fly, and that's about little Billy and the tragedy of losing him, losing a child and living with hope. I mean, that's a sentence that it just doesn't make any sense. Losing a child and living with hope.
Well, right. It's a misnomer, kind of.
Yeah. But you lived it and you walked it. And it's so beautiful. And then to lose your husband 11 years later, again, the name of the book is I Am Widow, Hear Me Roar. It's JoAnn Kuzma Deveny. And do you have a website where people can get more information on these books?
Yeah, I do. It's JoAnnDeveny.com.
Okay, and that's JoAnnDeveny. We're going to put that on our Widow's Heart Facebook page, but we're not done yet. But I just wanted to get that out there.
Also, Pam, you can buy my books on Amazon, all three of them. So
yes,
that's where they are mostly for sale. Yeah.
Yep, and that's what I'm looking at right here. Okay, so let's talk to the parents who have lost a child, because so many of our listeners, widowers, but on a grief journey of a child, or a mom or a dad or something like that. But to lose a child and you've gone through on that journey, what advice do you have to help get through it? Because like you said, you go through the stages and the guilt and things like that. I mean, and I know that you lean on your faith, and that's all we can do. And it's a big thing to do.
I'd say, besides the faith, and with the faith in mind, surround yourself with people who are willing to talk about Billy and be comfortable, or talk about your child, or and be comfortable with your tears, and don't be amiss if they say the wrong thing. I know even everything I've gone through, I'll approach a bereaved person, and I may have said something very idiotic, but just you being there is what counts.
Yeah.
Instead of standing back and avoiding that person. But for the bereaved persons, like I said, symbolism was so important for me. Lighting a candle with Billy's picture, allowing the tears, praying, eventually watching the videos, which are very hard, of your child or your husband. Going to the grave. I went to Billy's grave for Groundhog Day. I mean, every single holiday there was, I would go to the grave, and I'd bring my 4-year-old with me.
Right.
And keep your family and friends. Allow them to help you.
Yeah, JoAnn, too. That brings to mind what I hear a lot too is talk to us about them. Talk to me about my child. Talk to me about my husband. If you have a memory, nothing makes me smile more, even now, so many years later, is when someone comes up and goes, "Oh, I remember John," and then they tell a story, and it makes me laugh, and it's great, because I know that John is in heaven. John was a man of faith, and none of us are perfect, that's for sure. But when we were at the Lakewood Cemetery, and after his service, and then we had the casket and everything, and I've shared this before, the guy from Albin Funeral Home, that was a ministry more than anything. And I said, is this just so weird? It's so weird that we're going to bury a piece of furniture. And he said, well, put it this way. He goes, the shell's in there, but the nut's in heaven.
I love it. I love that. It's funny. Yeah. And I have a chapter in my widow book, I Am Widow, Hear Me Roar, about how I spent months grieving Dick, but not the real Dick. Not my real husband. I was grieving all his positive aspects, because that's what you miss the most about them. And then I watched a video of him, and I'm going, that's not the guy I've been grieving. Because then I realized his faults, his irritation, or my irritations with him. And finally, I could grieve for the whole person. None of us, like you said, are perfect. And like you said, with those new memories, when people tell you new memories of your husband or your child, it's almost like they come alive again. The person comes alive again because it's something you didn't know about them before.
Yep. It's amazing. So don't stand in the background. As JoAnn said, just if you have something to share, it's going to bring a smile to the face of someone who has lost someone. So in I Am Widow, Hear Me Roar, that's where you were talking about the signs. And I know that God will allow beautiful things to happen. For someone, it might be a cardinal. And I've had instances of that. And that happened for you, didn't it?
That's right. Yes. Well, the month before Dick died, we went on a usual family vacation, my son and Dick and I. And we always drove, even though flying was cheaper because I was a flight attendant. But my husband liked to be in control behind the wheel. He didn't like standing in lines. So we went that summer, and my husband always picked up a coffee mug. We didn't have a lot of money, so that was our big purchases.
Right.
Little gadgets,
It means so much. Yeah.
He'd always pick up one coffee mug with a destination name on it or something like that. Well, that summer, a month before he died, he picked up a coffee mug with a loon on it, but he also picked up a coffee mug for myself. So he picked up two. That was the first time he ever did that. And I didn't really think anything of it. I just thought, he was getting to ARP age and maybe becoming a little more considerate.
Did you say ARP, AARP age?
He was 49. He was 49, yeah. Yeah. So I really didn't think anything of it until it was about a month after my husband died. And I was not a gardener back then. I knew nothing about gardening. Now my yard is filled with only flowers and not grass. But getting back to the day I built my first garden, it was a rose garden, and it was on the lake side of the house. Now I live very close to the lake, thus how Billy ran into the water. It's about 10 feet from the rocks that lead down to the lake. So I'm on that side doing a rose garden, thinking of Dick on my knees, and a tear comes down my eye. And then I hear the call of a loon at the end of my dock. No, in 2002, there were no loons on Lake Minnetonka. None. I had never seen one in 2000. Now they're plentiful.
Yeah.
Back then, I had never seen one. But he was swimming around my dock, and he was doing his mating call. He was cooing.
So beautiful. Yeah.
I stood up and I go, oh my gosh, Dick, here you are. I could feel him right there. I could feel God right there with me. And a big smile came across my face. And that I understood the meaning of those loon mugs. And I think God allowed that to happen for my comfort. And that never happened again. Now, Billy sent a lot of signs, and I talk about those in When Bluebirds Fly. But that was the one and only time that Dick and God came and gave me a very hopeful sign.
Yeah, a hopeful sign. And when that happened to me, and I won't go into story because, again, I've shared it on other podcasts, but it was a sign. And it's still in my heart. You know what I mean? And I had friends that I shared it with, and they're like, oh, did John come and visit you again? I said, it wasn't John. Let me be very clear. It was not John. John does not leave heaven. That's not part of the deal. Right, but God will allow this to happen. And it's just was a one-time thing. And I just take it out of my heart and just relive it and just know that there is an eternity waiting for all of us who accept Christ as our Savior, and just such an imperfect earth. Your third book, which we haven't talked enough about, your first book, I should say, right?
It was my first book, yes.
99 Ways to Make a Flight Attendant Fly Off the Handle, a guide for the novice or oblivious air traveler. We only have just about 5 more minutes left here, but you have been a lifetime flight attendant. You mentioned it a couple of times. Are you still flying?
No, I retired 5 years ago.
Okay.
Yep, during the COVID. And got a buyout. I'm 65, so I just saw that as a sign it was time to go after 42 years.
Oh, my goodness. Well, for those of us who love to fly and probably don't know how to do it right, what are some of the top things, maybe top 3 things that we could do to make your life a little bit easier as a flight attendant?
Some of them are pretty basic, and most people know them.
Yeah.
Like, don't bring stinky kimchi on the airplane and eat it next to your passenger.
Yeah. A Subway with a bunch of onions.
Exactly. Or a bunch of onions. Or, just these little things. With each one of them, it doesn't tick off a flight attendant. But when one passenger does 57 of them or 57 passengers do one of them, then it becomes a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Block the aisle during boarding and, fold your coat like it's an American flag, and just stand there for 10 minutes. So many things that you could make everybody's life more easier.
Yeah.
But that book I wrote as a means to an end. Ends to a mean.
Means to an end. Yep.
Means to an end. Because I wanted to make some money so I could publish When Bluebirds Fly. Oh. And I wanted to affiliate myself as a marketer, an author who can market her book so that a publisher would pick up When Bluebirds Fly. And a publisher did pay for the publishing and pick up the rights to When Bluebirds Fly after I sold over 10,000 copies of 99 Ways. Yeah.
And they have touched these books so many hearts. First of all, you have a great sense of humor. If you can find on Amazon, you can find the 99 Ways to Make a Flight Attendant Fly Off the Handle, and then When Bluebirds Fly and I Am Widow, Hear Me Roar. Just in my life, I've gone through a lot of hard times, but being a widow was one of them. But the loss of a child as well. God is really at work in your heart and with you, and you have helped so many people with these award-winning books. I mean, you have received so many incredible awards as well, correct?
Thank you. Thank you, Pam. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were 5 for When Bluebirds Fly. I Am Widow. I had 2, and also 99 Ways. There were 2 awards. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's speak to the widow here, who maybe is just the first few months or first, year into it and just really having a hard time. What encouragement do you have for her? Or him.
Always. I know, you lose friends when you're a widow. It's inevitable. You lose friends. So don't be afraid to accept friendships that are new or to accept invitations that people might ask you to go, even though it feels uncomfortable or you don't think that these people have anything in common with you. Force yourself to go out. Force yourself to see new people because you need friends and family surrounding you. Keep talking about your husband. Even if people are uncomfortable, if one person's uncomfortable, go to the next one. Keep talking about your husband. And like I said, surround yourself with people who are not afraid of your tears.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, JoAnn, it has been so great catching up with you. And we're so excited to have these books available. I know that they're going to be wonderful resources for our listeners here at A Widow's Heart. And we just appreciate you so much. It's been great to see you and talk with you.
You too, Pam. Thank you for having me on.